Castle of Heart is more like a Castle of Disappointment. Now in this game, I had very high hopes for, considering it was a Nintendo Switch exclusive. Developers seem very excited about developing for the platform, but after playing it, there's definitely some issues across the board. So let's first start off with the story, then we'll get into some of the good, which is not a lot, and then the bad. So the story basically is typical, I don't know, fairy tale-ish. You got a dude, there's a girl, there's a wizard that comes in, or a sorcerer. He kind of destroys everything in terms of the village that they're living in, turns a lot of people into mindless husks that just attack anything in sight. Then he turns the main character into stone, but then the maiden or his girlfriend or whatever has one single tear that warms his heart to where his heart basically brings him back because of that single tear. But then the sorcerer came and took the girl off, then you have to go save them. You have to talk to people to get to there. So yeah, that's the basic premise of the story. I mean, nothing really too complex. It seems passable, so overall the story, meh. I mean, there's not a lot of story in between, not a lot of dialogue either, so story is what it is, very simple, but that's what you would expect for this style of game. This is supposed to be a throwback to the old school, but there really isn't much to the story outside of that. Now, moving on to the good. So the good is that the graphics are actually somewhat passable when it comes to things, especially for the size of the developer. You're gonna see some nice effects here and there. The resolution seems clear enough, and overall it has a nice clean presentation to it in terms of graphical style for what they're trying to go for and the size of the developer. I want to make sure I stress that. Now that's pretty much all of the good, guys, and I'm not trying to exaggerate here. There's not a ton of good about this game. We'll talk about some of the level design and stuff like that coming up, and yeah, let's talk about that, I guess, right? So the bad. So the bad with this title is that the controls. That's the first thing that pops out when you play this game and you want to actually get into it, is the controls. It has this weird floaty kind of weight to it when you jump, and it just looks horrible in terms of the animations. Doesn't look very good at all when it comes to that. And then it's the combat as well. I mean, you just have multiple things here. The combat is just not very good, and if you combine that with the bad controls, I mean, it gets the job done, don't get me wrong, but it never feels like you have complete control with the combat. Like when you're fighting someone, like you're just standing still and you're just like kind of rock'em sock'em robots slashing at each other. It's a very boring combat with controls that necessarily don't feel as precise. I mean, it's something that you really have to play to see what I'm talking about, but it just doesn't feel as precise. There's not a lot of movement going on when you're slashing your sword, when you're trying to do down attacks to kind of break through objects below you to find secrets. That doesn't feel responsive. It just feels a tick behind no matter what control scheme you have, whether you're playing in portable mode, whether you're playing with Joy-Cons detached or playing with the Pro Controller. Nothing ever feels quite as smooth or as fast as it needs to be. For example, you have a game like Kirby Star Allies to where you have that free movement when you're attacking with the sword. You can kind of adjust a little bit. It feels more responsive even in 30 frames per second. You don't get those pinpoint controls here. You don't get that accuracy, and that's probably my biggest complaint with it, and just how simplistic the combat is. Now, you can have a game that's hard all you want to, but if the controls are bad and if the combat is simplistic and there isn't a lot of depth to what you have to do, even in a throwback old school beat 'em up like this, you're not gonna have a lot of fun. Even playing back in the day, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game had more depth in terms of combat variation than this game. Now, to this game's credit, it does have stuff like extra items. You have knives that you can throw, you have bombs that you can throw, you have a power attack that you can do, and you do get some new abilities across the way, but overall it just feels like you're fighting against the controls and the stupid enemies in this game. And there's one thing that I really wanted to point out when it comes to the combat, or when it comes to the AI in this game, and this one I found really funny. But if you just jump on a lot of the normal enemies' heads, like they'll just do nothing. They'll just sit there and just duck down, and you can just be right on top of their head, and they're just gonna be like, all right, well, I guess I'm screwed because this dude is on top of my head and he's stoned. So I mean, I thought you would smash them like a Goomba, like Mario, but that is not the case, and you can just keep jumping up and back down, and they'll just get up, and oh, you're just squished again. I thought it was the most hilarious thing that I have ever seen, or one of the most hilarious things that I've seen in a game when it comes to a modern game that's trying to emulate that beat 'em up style. It just seemed very awkward when I was playing the game, and I laughed for a good amount of time as I jumped up and down like a trampoline on this enemy here. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out with the AI and kind of what this game is like. You know, it just seems unfinished. It just seems like they didn't spend enough time with certain things, especially with the combat. The combat is where I felt that independent developers usually can get things right. Maybe they don't have the money for the graphics, maybe they don't have the money for all the different modes and online, but usually combat is something that they get right. SteamWorld Dig 2, we've seen it with Shovel Knight. All those games just feel so much more responsive and fluid and fun to fight enemies, whereas this one just doesn't have that, and that's my main thing. Now, there are some stuff that you can do. You have different weapons that you can get. You have a crossbow that shoots extremely slow and is really clunky to control. You do have some different weapons like swords. You also have like bats. There's just all sorts of stuff that you can pick up, although it does take a little bit of time to pick those up. It's like he takes his time, he goes, he takes a little squared up look, and then he grabs it super slowly, and it's like, I know he's made out of stone, but Jesus, like, does he have to grab it so slowly? Sometimes the enemies are coming because they just respawn kind of like Mega Man. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I mean, it just seems kind of random at times depending on where you are on the map. And if it seems like I'm going all over the place sometimes with this, that's because that's how this game is and how you'll feel about it when you play it. There's definitely some positive aspects about it. I mean, you think that there's some potential when you start playing it, but then you start realizing how shallow the combat is. And being an independent developer, just because it's that, doesn't mean that they shouldn't have some more combat options. Even when you grab another weapon or anything, I mean, maybe you get a little bit of an attack boost, but there's not really any more combos or things available to you. You just do like a double sworded or double batted attack, and it's like the same thing for each one. So to me, it just seems like they just threw those in there just to throw them in there. I would have liked to see a little bit more combat options. There is a parry. When you block, you'll parry them, but there's no timing to it. It's not like you have to press right at the right time. Just block, you'll parry. So I don't know. I don't really know about what they were trying to go for, why they didn't kind of smooth out exactly what they're looking for in terms of that. Now, level design is also somewhat of a mess. You have these levels to where like you're just like sliding down, but if you combine that with the floaty, jumpy controls, the kind of just the offness of it, not as precise, it doesn't make it as fun to platform in this game, because there are platforming parts, and trust me, you'll just sometimes just die just because the controls just aren't great. The weight, I guess, I don't know, the dynamics of it, the gravity, like what you can do is just not necessarily what you'd expect to move in a platformer, and it just creates some wonky moments, some wonky level design. I see that they try to kind of mix things up so it's not boring, so I'll give it some credit for that, for trying to mix things up, but overall, it's just not a game that has a really well put together package. When you start considering everything, and the sound design too, the sound just isn't necessarily great. Like when you hit enemies, it just doesn't feel like there's impact at all. It doesn't feel like there's impact, doesn't feel like there's like a great battle going on. In games like Castlevania, it feels a lot better and stuff like that, and that's Castlevania, just hitting them with a whip or whatever a million times, and that felt a lot better even back in the day. So I don't feel that this is completely wasted effort when it comes to Castle of Heart on the Nintendo Switch. They can take this, they can learn from it, they can create a better game, but they have to go back to the drawing board, starting with combat and starting with controls, and get that right. They have the graphics down. I think the graphics and the engine are okay for what they're trying to do, but they really need to spend that time on the controls and the combat. The story is not great, but at the same time, you're not really tuning in, or you're not really looking for this game to be like a great like Mass Effect or anything like that, or even like Legend of Zelda, or anything that's going to be great when it comes to stories. This is just a game that you just pick up and you just get into and you play. There is some difficult parts. You are going to get surrounded by enemies at times, and there's one thing that actually makes this game more difficult, is that you're constantly losing health because of your stone body, and you're chiseling away, so you have to be constantly moving. So I guess I do like that a little bit when it comes to it, but you combine all the other stuff that I talked about, some of the controls, some of the bad level designs, some of the just wonky jumps that you have to do, and you can just end up dying out of nowhere. Now, I'm not putting that against the game, it's just, it is something that does add to the difficulty, which is cool, which is, I guess, not bad, but like I said, some people might find it annoying that you're constantly losing health and you have to kill enemies in order to regain a little bit of health, or you find these health power-ups. There's also some magic or meter that you can use as well. I had a little bit more expectations for this game to be better, and it just didn't necessarily come through, although you might find some enjoyment out of it. So let's go ahead and get into Player Essence's verdict on this game. So as you can see the price here, you can kind of see the specs in terms of what's going on. So my verdict of this game is definitely going to be a pass for right now. It's not necessarily polished enough for you guys, in my opinion, to pick up for what I think. Now, you might find some enjoyment out of this if you're looking for an old school beat 'em up style of game that necessarily has some issues. Maybe you might like the difficulty or some things like that, and you can put up with all the stuff that I talked about. Maybe it's a buy for you, but for everyone else, I'm not so sure about it. But like I said, you never know, right? You never know when it comes to what you want to play. So make your own judgment, but in my opinion, it is a pass for right now. All right, guys, that wraps it up for my review of Castle of Heart on the Nintendo Switch. If you did like my review, please drop a comment below, hit the like button, and share the video just so we can get more people into the village of Player Essence checking out the content here. And it lets me know that you guys want more reviews and you guys want more content like this. Also, make sure you check out our description below. We got Facebook and Twitter social media. Give us a like and a follow on our social media. It really helps us spread the content of Player Essence across the webs in addition to YouTube. And be on the lookout for more videos every single day from Player Essence. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you ninja for the next video. Peace.